In a small African village surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, there lived a young woman named Avena. She was known throughout the village for her dazzling beauty, her radiant ebony skin, and her eyes that reflected the light of the stars. Avena had grown up in a humble family, raised by her widowed mother, Amma, who had always taught her the importance of integrity and self-respect. Despite her modest upbringing, Avena was different, intelligent, curious, and with an indomitable spirit. She dreamed of a future that went beyond the borders of her village, a future where women could be free to choose their own destinies. However, the reality of Bagada was very different, and soon Avena would find herself entangled in a web of secrets and lies that would change her life forever. The change began when Avena turned 18. The men of the village, captivated by her beauty and independent nature, began to court her with gifts and sweet words. Avena, who had always been reserved, started to accept the attention with a mix of curiosity and caution. Her mother, Amma, had warned her about the dangers of giving in to temptation, but Avena couldn't help but feel drawn to the idea of experiencing life beyond the strict boundaries her mother had set for her. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. Let's continue. One of the men most persistent in winning Avena's affection was Kwame, the son of the village chief. Kwame was handsome, charismatic, and above all, powerful. He was used to getting what he wanted, and Avena would be no exception. At first, Avena rejected him, recalling her mother's words about self-respect. But over time, Kwame became more persuasive, using his position and wealth to draw Avena closer to him. One day, Kwame invited Avena to a celebration at the chief's house. The party was filled with music, dancing, and an abundance of food. Avena, dazzled by the opulence and the attention she received, set her doubts aside and allowed herself to enjoy the moment. However, the night took a dark turn when Kwame, taking advantage of Avena's trust, led her to a secluded room and, despite her initial protests, seduced her. What Avena didn't know was that this would be just the first of many dark nights. After their encounter, Kwame began boasting to his friends about his conquest. The rumors quickly spread throughout the village, and soon, other men started seeking Avena's company. Each of them courted her with gifts and empty promises, and each, like Kwame, betrayed her trust. Trapped in a cycle of manipulation and deceit, Avena began to feel cornered. She knew what was happening was wrong, but every time she tried to speak up or defend herself, the men of the village threatened her with defamation, warning they would ruin her reputation and that of her mother. Terrified of the consequences of revealing the truth to her mother, she chose to remain silent, bearing the weight of her pain alone. But Avena's silence could not last forever. Over time, the signs of her pregnancy began to show. At first, she tried to hide it by wearing looser clothing and avoiding the curious glances of the village women. However, her belly grew, and eventually, the truth became impossible to conceal. The women in the village, noticing her condition, began murmuring among themselves. Some looked at her with disdain, others with compassion, but all knew that a scandal of this magnitude would not go unanswered. Now isolated and scorned by her community, Avena had no one to turn to. The rumor of her pregnancy eventually reached the ears of the village chief, who called an emergency meeting with the elders. During the meeting, it was decided that Avena must be punished for her behavior, as her situation endangered the honor and morality of the village. But before the punishment could be carried out, Avena, desperate and with no other options, decided to confront the men who had brought her to this point. She confronted Kwame, the man who had started it all, and publicly accused him of being the father of her child. However, Kwame, fearing for his own reputation, vehemently denied the accusation and called her a liar. The situation became chaotic as other men in the village, fearing they might be exposed, also began to deny any involvement with Avena. The young woman, alone and desperate, tried to defend herself but was silenced by the accusations of the powerful men who now saw her as a threat. Finally, in an act of desperation, Avena decided to take her fate into her own hands. She knew her life in the village was ruined, and that she could never restore her honor or that of her family. One night, under the light of the moon, Avena packed her belongings and left Bagada forever. She traveled for days, crossing rivers and mountains, until she arrived in a distant city where no one knew her. There, she began a new life, far from the men who had betrayed her and the village that had rejected her. In time, Avena gave birth to a son, a strong and healthy boy she named Kofi. Avena's new beginning in the city of Obien was not easy. She arrived knowing no one, with a baby in her arms and a painful past that haunted her every night. Despite the challenges, Avena resolved not to let her past define her future. She knew she had to be strong not only for herself but also for her son, Kofi. Avena found refuge in a small neighborhood in the city where the people welcomed her with kindness. The community was made up of hard-working, humble individuals, many of whom had also left their hometowns in search of a better life. Over time, Avena began to make a living by working in a local market, selling fruits and vegetables she bought from regional farmers. Although life in Obien was difficult, Avena felt free for the first time. She no longer had to worry about the judgmental stares of the villagers or the men who had betrayed her. However, her past remained a shadow that followed her everywhere. At night, when Kofi finally fell asleep, Avena would sit in the small room she rented and think about her mother, Amma. She wondered if she was okay, if she had managed to endure the shame and pain her departure had caused. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. Let's continue. Time passed, and Kofi grew up healthy and strong under Avena's loving care. As he grew older, he began asking questions about his father, questions Avena wasn't ready to answer. She knew she would eventually have to tell her son the truth, but wasn't sure how to do so without burdening him with the pain of her own story. One day, while Avena was working at the market, a middle-aged man approached her stall. He had a kind expression and wore a straw hat that shielded his face from the sun. "Good morning, madam," the man said in a gentle voice. "I've been watching how you work here every day. You're very dedicated." Avena, surprised by the man's kindness, smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing what I can to care for my son." The man nodded and then introduced himself as Kojo, a merchant who traveled through the region buying and selling goods. "I've seen many things in my travels," he said, "but rarely have I encountered someone with as much determination as you." Kojo continued, "I know it's not easy for a single mother, especially in a city like this." His words resonated deeply with Avena, who had grown used to solitude and the daily struggle of survival. Kojo began visiting Avena's stall more often, buying fruits and vegetables and always taking a moment to chat with her. Over time, Avena began to trust him, sharing parts of her story, though she never revealed the darkest details. Kojo, for his part, never pressured her to say more than she was comfortable with. He respected her deeply and admired her resilience. As the months passed, their bond grew stronger, and Kojo developed a deep affection for both Avena and Kofi. One day, Kojo made a proposal Avena hadn't expected. "Avena," he said as they sat together at the end of a long day at the market, "I've been thinking. You and Kofi are like family to me. I'd like you to come live with me. I can provide a home for you both and take care of you. I don't want you to keep struggling alone." Avena sat in silence, overwhelmed by his offer. For years, she had been independent, accustomed to relying only on herself. The idea of trusting someone else, especially a man, filled her with a mixture of fear and relief. However, she saw the sincerity in Kojo's eyes, and after much thought, she accepted his offer. Moving into Kojo's home was a significant change for Avena and Kofi. The house was modest but comfortable, with enough space for Kofi to play and a small plot of land where Avena could grow her own vegetables. Kojo treated Kofi as if he were his own son, teaching him how to fish and how to recognize different plants and animals in the region. One day, while Kojo was away on one of his trading trips, Kofi, now 5 years old, approached Avena with a question she had long feared would come. "Mama," he said, his big eyes filled with curiosity, "where is my papa? All my friends have a papa, but I don't." Avena's heart sank. She had dreaded this moment, but she knew she couldn't keep avoiding the truth. She sat down next to Kofi and took his hands in hers. "Kofi, my dear," she began gently. "This is a difficult story, but I think you're old enough to understand it." With care, Avena told Kofi about her life in Bagada, how she had grown up in a village where things were not always fair and how she had ended up pregnant with him. She explained that there wasn't one man he could call his father, but rather that his existence was the result of a series of painful and complicated events. Despite the revelation, Kofi continued to live his life with the innocence of childhood. When Kojo returned from his trip, he noticed something different about Kofi, a sudden maturity in his behavior. Seeing the concern in Kojo's eyes, Avena shared what had happened. Kojo, who had always treated Avena and Kofi with respect, embraced her and said, "You have nothing to worry about. Kofi is a strong boy, and what you've told him will only make him stronger. The important thing is that he knows he's loved and has a family that supports him." The years went by, and Kofi, now a young man, decided to set out on his own path. Although Avena felt a mix of pride and sadness watching him leave, she knew she had done everything she could to prepare him for the world. Kojo was also proud of Kofi, knowing he had helped raise him with the right values. Kofi traveled to many lands, trading and learning from the different cultures he encountered along the way. He became a respected and admired man, known for his integrity and wisdom. Although he always carried with him the memories of his mother and Kojo, he also felt a persistent curiosity about his roots and the village his mother had spoken of. Finally, after many years of traveling, Kofi decided it was time to confront his family's past. He wanted to visit Bagada, the village where his mother's life had begun and where their story had originated. Avena, though worried, supported his decision. She knew Kofi needed to find his own answers and make peace with his past. When Kofi arrived in Bagada, he found a village that had changed little over time. The same dusty roads, the same mud brick houses, and the same atmosphere of tradition and rigidity remained. However, there was something different in the air, a sense of tension and mistrust that he hadn't expected. Kofi introduced himself to the village chief, an elderly man who had heard rumors about Avena's son. "I have come to learn about my origins," Kofi said respectfully. "I want to know the truth about my mother and my father." The chief looked at him with a mixture of surprise and concern. After a long silence, he said, "Your mother was a strong woman. She suffered greatly here, but in the end, she was stronger than all of us. I do not know who your father is, Kofi, because no one in this village was brave enough to admit the truth." Kofi, though disappointed, was not surprised by the chief's response. He knew the truth about his origins was complex and that there was no simple answer. Still, being in Bagada gave him a sense of closure. He realized he didn't need to know his biological father to understand who he was. His identity had been shaped by the love and upbringing he had received from his mother and Kojo. Before leaving Bagada, Kofi visited the house where his mother had grown up. It was an old, abandoned structure, crumbling with time. He stayed there for a long while, reflecting on everything he had learned and how his life had been shaped by his mother's choices. When he returned to Obien, Kofi found Avena and Kojo waiting for him with open arms. He had found the peace he had been searching for and knew that, despite the complications of his origins, his life was full of love and possibilities. Avena felt relieved to see that her son had found peace. She knew she had made difficult decisions in her life, but also knew she had done the best she could with the circumstances she had faced. With Kojo's support, she continued to live her life with dignity, grateful for the love and family she had built. The story of Avena and Kofi became a legend in their community, a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the ability to overcome even the most difficult challenges. Although Bagada was now just a memory, Avena knew her legacy would live on through Kofi and future generations. As Kofi grew older and started his own family, he passed on the lessons he had learned from his mother and Kojo. He taught his children to be strong, to face adversity with courage, and to value love and loyalty above all else. Thank you for enjoying this story. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.